Welcome back, friends. In today's episode, we step once again into the world of William, Will, and the ever mysterious Mai Li as their story unfolds with courage, danger, and quiet strength. If you enjoy this journey, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and click the notification button so you never miss the next chapter. Settle in, and let's continue this exciting adventure together. Chapter 7: The Wedding. It was a festive occasion at Braithwaite Manor. Preparations for his daughter's wedding were complete, and guests began to arrive. The wedding was presided over by the local bishop of the Church of England. The bishop, who boasted of being a close friend of Lord Braithwaite's, still pocketed his offer of gold for performing the ceremony. William laughed to himself about the cost of position and self-importance when he saw the gold coins disappear into the bishop's elaborate robes. William was greeted by several of the town's merchants and tradesmen, who, since they did business with Lord Braithwaite, had also been invited and attended with their wives. The ladies were displayed in their best finery, dresses from the best houses in Europe, and many necks displayed expensive fine jewelry. William looked at his wife Jessica standing across the room talking with the bishop's wife. In his eyes, she was the most beautiful of all the women, standing in her simple dress made by her own hands. It was fashionable and made from silk, and with Mai Li's help, a bit of Chinese influence, beautiful but not extravagant like the dresses of the merchants' wives. Jessica wore a strand of pearls William obtained in a trade with the jeweler. He placed them around her slim throat as they dressed for the evening's occasion. They were not as spectacular as the diamonds and rubies on the other ladies in the room. However, even without all the diamonds and rubies, Jessica was his jewel, and he was quite proud to be her escort. The wedding feast was about to begin, and the white-coated waitstaff were seating everyone. William and his family were placed at Lord Braithwaite's table. Mai Li stood just a few feet behind Will, against the wall like a shadow, unnoticed. William looked at the feast spread out before them and thought about how different his dinner table had become since Mai Li had joined their family. He knew he should eat sparingly, as his stomach was not used to such rich fare. He had come to understand how this type of food was not easily digested. William would be 40 years old in a few months, an old man by standards of the time, and yet had no gray in his hair. He was lean and fit both from the hard work that contoured his muscles and from the good food Mai Li had taught them to eat. His wife was also approaching 40 years, and anyone could see she looked younger than most of the women in the room who were not yet 30. She had the waist of a young girl. She was not portly like the wives of the merchants and tradesmen. Her skin glowed with good health, and she still, after all these years, excited him like no other woman. Will sat looking at the food, but eating little. He had been raised on Mai Li's cooking, and this food tasted strange and smelled. He was not sure how to describe it, it just smelled. Mai Li used pork and beef sparingly in her cooking. She cooked fish and chicken mostly, and sometimes a duck or lamb in winter months when ports were closed due to rough weather. When William had been successful on a hunt with Lord Braithwaite, Mai Li would smoke and dry the venison with herbs. She grew vegetables and mushrooms year-round in straw-covered beds she prepared beside the forge. Mai Li foraged for wild plants and herbs almost daily, except for the times the weather would not permit. William was drawn from thought by the mention of his name by Lord Braithwaite as he was making the wedding speech. Soon the bride and groom would be leaving to begin their first night together, and Lord Braithwaite had acknowledged his debt to William for saving his daughter's life. "Without William here, this night would not be possible," he went on. "William and his family have made a large contribution too." Lord Braithwaite was cut short by the crashing of glass as the French windows exploded inward and a musket was fired into the room, the shot striking the chandler's wife. She fell forward across the table as blood streamed from a wound in her dangling arm. Through the open doors walked the dirtiest, foulest-smelling men William had ever seen. "Pirates? Here?" William thought. They shouted a demand for silence while brandishing an odd assortment of weapons. Only one had a musket, and he was the one that had fired indiscriminately into the room. Only the leader had a pistol, and the rest of the fouled lot either had a rusty knife or a short sword. These men were dressed in rags and looked as if they hadn't had a meal in days. They had that desperate look of starving men with nothing to lose. William understood men like these were the most dangerous. William exchanged a quick wordless message with his son. Most men present at the wedding were unarmed except for the few militaries who were friends of the groom, Major Christian White. These officers carried dress swords that were quite elegant, but most were made of poor quality steel or even pig iron and worthless in combat. William and Will both carry their swords as part of their formal dress. The original swords presented to each by Lord Braithwaite were at home in the presentation box. The ones they carried were made of the new steel developed from methods derived from the 8 books of fate and wisdom. Will returned his father's signal and knew William that they would have to act quickly to keep the rest of the guests from harm. Mei Li stepped from the shadows to Will's side as the 4 most aggressive men sidled forward. The largest pirate, who seemed to be the leader of this small ragtag band of filthy men, stepped forward brandishing his pistol and took the glass of wine from Jessica's hand and drank it, crashed the glass against the wall, and then laughed a high screeching laugh like that of a madman exposing his almost toothless mouth. Then he growled in a low voice, "Look here, you lot, we'll have your gold or you'll die, and it won't be quiet going neither," and he spat on the floor. Will thought to himself, if he were to ever paint a picture of a pirate, it would be this man. He certainly looked and smelled the part. The next thing the man did was a stupid mistake and his last. He reached forward and grabbed Jessica and ripped her dress. What happened next, witnesses could not accurately describe. Everyone said Mei Li made a small noise in her throat and seemed to glide forward like a ghost. Her ever-present staff seemed to fall forward, accidentally striking the pirate's head, and he dropped to the floor like an anchor and lay still. Will drew his sword and defended 2 of the other men within the first few seconds. William disarmed a third with the flick of his blade as it came from the sheath in one smooth, easy motion. Will and Mei Li moved forward into the group of men, one of whom was trying to grab a hostage as a shield as he backed away from the fight. His plan was foiled quickly when a knife thrown by Mei Li went completely through his arm and pinned him to the wooden wall panel like a tick on a needle. His hostage, the wife of the silversmith, screamed and backed quickly away. Will quickly executed Monk's sword, a figure-8 motion followed by a quick striking thrust dropping the next man. Mei Li, protecting Jessica, stood just behind Will and William, and when one man came within range, her staff flashed out, breaking the man's hand and sending his knife flying. Then the end of her staff flashed out twice in quick succession, striking the man in his toothless mouth, driving his head back. Then striking directly into the man's throat, he dropped to the floor and never regained his feet. Will stepped forward to meet the next attacker. His sword caught the tablecloth, pulling it from his hand and clattered to the floor. The pirate sought to take advantage of this situation and lunged at Will with the point of his blade, intending to strike Will in the heart with his knife. But when the knife arrived on target, Will was no longer where the man thought he would be. Instead of retreating, Will had stepped forward to his left to the outside of the man's thrust. Will's left hand parried the outside of the attacker's wrist, and his right hand grabbed the man's hand to control the blade. Will then executed crossing talon. Stepping forward across the man's body, he drove his forearm down, dislocating the man's elbow. He stepped back and using the pirate's injured arm, he propelled him around and into the blade of the man who had stepped up behind them, trying to put a short sword in Will's back. The 2 pirates looked at each other in bewilderment for several seconds before the one impaled by his comrade's blade dropped to the floor, followed almost instantly by the sword holder who caught a snapping blow to the head from Mei Li's bamboo staff. William was matching swords with a large, bearded pirate with a puckered brand on his arm and part of one ear missing. The man lunged forward with a thrust of his rusty blade. As his forward foot touched down, Mei Li's bamboo staff swept the foot from underneath him. Her staff then twirled, striking him under the chin. He dropped unconscious to the floor where William quickly disarmed him. Another minute and it was all over, the men subdued, and soon the pirates were bound with rope and carted away by the local magistrate who was also been a guest at the wedding. As he carted them away, he was yelling, "You'll be gallows bait tomorrow, you bleedin' fools!" His adrenaline still running high from the excitement. Soon everyone had been given sweet tea or a glass of brandy or other spirits, and adrenaline levels dropped back to normal. Everyone settled down. Lord Braithwaite tapped the side of his glass and began his speech again. "Well, it seems we owe William and his family another debt of gratitude." William and Will bowed their heads and tried to look humble, even though they were both quite pleased with their performance. Mei Li melted back into the shadows. I thank the Creator for the small bit of courage and the lessons of His Lordship's Sergeant-at-Arms for training my sword arm, William said in as humble a manner as possible. The party began to break up, disturbed by the excitement. Many women were beginning to complain of headaches. Soon coaches arrived and everyone began to depart. Lord Braithwaite thanked William. Will had moved to his mother's side, standing next to Mei Li in the shadows. Those men were hungry and desperate. They wouldn't have braved such an ill-planned attempt at robbery had they not been so. They must have heard at a local tavern the wealthy of the area would be attending a wedding. In their cups they thought they would find sheep to slaughter. William said to Lord Braithwaite. Lord Braithwaite was sharp-eyed and had seen more than William realized. His lordship was not fooled by William's easy dismissal of the situation. He knew if William and his son had not been in attendance, things might have been very different, with many lives lost. Having experienced combat, Lord Braithwaite saw things with a different eye. He had seen the coordinated attack of Will and Mei Li and noticed the color of the steel of the two flashing blades. He saw the unconventional sword and the unconventional way Will wielded it to dispatch the pirates. Lord Braithwaite had the dawning of an idea. Will might be what he required to make a proper investigation into some small puzzles that were troubling his business. He decided he would talk with Will's father about the idea, and then with his approval see to Will's education toward that goal. Thank you for joining us for another exciting episode in the saga of William, Will, and Mei Li. If you enjoyed today's story, please hit the like button, subscribe, share this video, and tap the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when the next chapter arrives. Your support helps this world grow, and I can't wait to have you back for the next thrilling installment.